And welcome to another edition of the Double A Team. I'm Ken Fang. My co-host, as you can see, next to me is Stephen Negishi, and we have a lot of things to discuss today. First of all, nice to be back after a couple weeks. Stephen, let's get right to it. The On the day that we're taping, President Biden announced that there was going to be a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Olympics, which is coming up very shortly in February, starting February 3rd. As you know, if you've been watching all the NBC platforms for sports, they'll be coming up soon. Um, the U.S. government will not send any diplomatic delegations to China. That does not mean, however, that the athletes will not be participating. They will. The athletes will participate. It's just that there will be no official U.S. delegation. This may also start the ball rolling for other delegations as well, like the United Kingdom and Australia. There'll be pressure put on them. Stephen, it all goes towards not just the situation we're going to discuss next, but also human rights violations in China as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We touched on our last show about Peng Shuai, the female Chinese tennis player who exposed her. Made accusations on her sexual assault against one of the high-ranking Chinese government officials, and there has been a lot of tapes being released by IOC to try and dispel notions that she's being put on a house arrest or she's being under control. But given the IOC's reputation these days, I'm not really holding my breath on whatever the heck Dick Pound or Thomas Bach are saying. Two high-ranking officials within IOC at this point. I know Dick Pound went on CNN last week, I believe, to have an interview, but that, in my opinion, really didn't do much considering their tarnished reputation. And it seems like IOC is just basically being a pawn to the the Chinese government in this matter. And there's a tabloid that I read in Japan that I follow. Pretty soon, at this rate, the Olympics are only going to be hosted by, mostly in Asian countries like Japan and China at this rate, because we all know the deficit and the cost of hosting Olympics sometimes just outweighs the goals and. Is it really worth it at this point in time?
Well, we can go into the white elephants that the Olympics have left behind in Greece and Brazil and all that. But in regards to China and what we were talking about, Peng Shuai, the tennis player, the female tennis player, has been seen only on official government channels over recently. In the immediate past, she has been seen and talked to Thomas Bach, the International Olympic Committee president, and also Dick Pound, who is an Olympic IOC member, who at one time was had a quite a good reputation, but recently he has come out and not looked very good, especially in light of the Peng Shuai situation, saying that there was unanimous consent that she was okay. I don't know what unanimous consent he was talking about. And then also in a sense that the fact that he came on and said that he didn't understand why there was criticism against the IOC, in which he told CNN's Christiane Amanpour that he didn't really see the reason for the criticism against the IOC when there's a lot of criticism that should be sent their way in regards to them holding water for dictators and despots going back to 1936 and the Berlin Olympics, and of course about going back to the 1980 Olympics in Moscow and the 2014 Sochi Olympics in Russia as well, and of course now the Olympics in 2008 and in China, and of course the one in 2022. So really the IOC really doesn't look good in this situation, Stephen. And as you mentioned, that they're coming off really as really tone deaf.
Oh, absolutely. WTA, Women's Tennis Association, have been very, very vocal about this. They pulled out at an event, I believe. They made that announcement last week, whereas ATP, which is the governing body that oversees the men's tennis side, has been somewhat slow in that
They've been
regard.
silent.
Yeah, it's very, very silent. Obviously, being silent in these moments makes you somewhat complicit in these situations. So it'll be interesting to see, where this goes, and will this diplomatic boycott is going to have any impact on the Olympics or even the on a global political scale
Well,
going forward.
China's president Xi Jinping has already said there will be implications and maybe some payback for this. He has always been talking very tough. He's talking this way about Taiwan as well, which is another issue which we won't get into. It doesn't have to do with sports, but people who know the Taiwan situation, like myself, going back to have Taiwanese descent, know about the threats from China and over Taiwan over many years. But it's getting a little bit tougher with the talk with Xi Jinping. But he is a person who likes to talk tough, likes to throw muscle around, and we'll see what happens in this situation. And Stephen, it's just, again. Money talks with China, even though they're a communist government, holding back tournaments which make money in China and pay China a lot, speaks words. So hopefully we'll see something more concrete with Peng Shui in the next few days or weeks, or even leading up to the Olympics. Maybe enforce their hand. But at this point, they're just talking tough and maintaining basically radio silence and basically making sure that she's only shown in the light that makes it look good for China.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, a lot of global sporting events nowadays. I also touched this in our last show. The next World Cup will be held in Qatar, which obviously doesn't have a stellar reputation when it comes to human rights as well. And it's funny that these sporting events nowadays on a global scale are in cahoots with these dictators. Obviously they have the money. They want to use sports as a platform for propaganda to make it look good. And I can say the same about Japan in last this summer, which, in all honesty, probably shouldn't have held the Olympics, because obviously the number of athletes who ended up getting COVID were astronomical. We haven't heard any athletes dying from it, but it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up developing long-term symptoms that prevents them from ever competing on the highest level. So, if those informations were withheld by the IOC and the Japanese government, obviously those things are that needs to be brought to light. Japan doesn't have a real stellar reputation when it comes to human rights, women's rights as well. Obviously, there were news being made around that the U.S. embassy in Japan were notifying their citizens that the Japanese police were racial profiling. So, for all that Japan was trying to do to boost their image through Olympics and other stuff, obviously this is an embarrassment, and that's something that the Asian countries needs to be held to a higher standard when it comes to hosting a global sporting events of this nature going forward. But unfortunately, it probably will not change anytime soon unless the pressure is being made.
Yeah. And the IOC is well known for lining its own pockets, well as not helping the host nations. If you take a look at some of the articles about some of the contracts that they have to sign, Tokyo is certainly not making any money and leaving behind probably deficits in regards to operating costs, and of course to the building, and of course for the infrastructure. Japan tried to do a lot to keep costs down, but the cost for the Olympic Stadium skyrocketed, tripled as a matter of fact, and um, Montreal, of course, didn't just pay off their debt until earlier this century in
Mhm.
regards to the debt for the 1976 Olympics. So you see how it's not a money making situation except for the International Olympic Committee. All right, let's move on to our next topic, which will be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And Stephen, and as you can see right down there on the below, Michael Chen, the writer for the Fighting Irish Wire, is going to be joining us. Let's talk about what happened with Notre Dame. I mean, the college football, of course, is always interesting. The college football coaching carousel is
Mhm.
always interesting. Notre Dame is one in which I don't think any one of us kind of saw this coming, but then all of a sudden LSU throws a lot of money at Brian Kelly, and then the next thing we know that he's off to LSU and leaves Notre Dame in the lurch.
Yeah, I did not see this one coming at all. I tweeted, Brian Kelly in the South. I thought it was a total, mismatch from a cultural and characteristic standpoint. In the South, obviously, it's very, very competitive. SEC, the old Big 12, and even way before that, the Southwestern Conference beforehand, which one time 30 for 30 made a huge documentary on the corruption with the SMU and the conference as a whole, if you remember.
The Pony XS, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
great.
Pony Express. Yes, that is correct. That is it's huge. It's huge. The boosters obviously demand a lot more. You saw Texas with the number of coaching carousels that they have gone through. LSU obviously, and Oklahoma recently. Lincoln Riley ended up leaving because he didn't want to go to the SEC, so he bolted for sunny Southern California to take over USC, which I think it was a smart decision on his behalf to build up a program that has been trending downwards for quite some time. And I'm very, very curious to see what Brian Kelly has in his, up his sleeve, because the way he left, obviously, didn't endear a lot of fans and alums. Obviously, the players who had to wake up at 7 in the morning and listen to him speak, which only lasted about 2 minutes, and he was off to Baton Rouge. So you wonder how that perception is going to be, follow him around going forward, because Nick Saban isn't going to retire anytime soon, and Auburn is there. Old Miss, with Lane Kiffin, who just re-upped. That's a tough conference in the
Mhm.
SEC East, I believe, and he definitely has his works cut.
Yep. So we have a guest coming in, and let's bring him in right now. Mike Chen of the USA Today network covering Notre Dame football joining us. So if he's not in there, that's fine. But let's talk to Mike Chen in regards to
Well,
he's not ready, so we'll
we'll keep
continue
talking.
talking. So, but in regards to this, Stephen, I mean, I have not. I will be honest. I have not been a big Notre Dame fan over the years.
Yeah,
Um,
me neither.
they and I know that they have their fans, and they're very militant, and they're very staunch and loyal to them. And of course, you talk about the folklore going back to the Four Horsemen, and going back to the coaches that they've had over the years, where it be Ara Parsegian or Lou Holtz, and then go back to all the way back to the 1920s, and some of the stuff they've done. Of course, some of the fans still live in those days and trying to
Mhm.
think that they can do the same thing and have their own
Sure.
network at NBC showing their home games. But I'm just always interested to hear from Mike and hear what he has to say in regards to this. But in regards to Brian Kelly, it's just really, to me, it's just leaving your kids in the lurch. saying a statement a couple weeks before saying, "Oh, I'm not leaving. It's going to take me $250 million to head on out, and the wife is going to have to make a decision on that as well." And then it seemingly much less. It took about $100 million for him to leave, but still, you leave your kids in the lurch. You say you have endless love for them, and then you text them by saying you have endless love, and then you're showing your love for them by having apparently the limit for his love is 2 minutes. So it's just really unbelievable, and really leaving a program in the lurch.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, Lincoln Riley, did the same thing. He said he wasn't going to take any questions about, LSU job questions, which was a very smart, because he took the USC, which obviously came out of left field. Nobody expected this happening. So that was a smart PR move by him to avoid this. And, he gave somewhat of a very weak interview with Scott Van Pelt the other day. I think it was last Sunday or so, because it took. He said it happened Sunday morning when the ball kept rolling, and I'm thinking to myself, and then he had to admit and retract the story, because you wake up that early after a loss and then start talking. I think Andrew Brandt said it best. I think his agents were talking behind closed doors for this, and obviously had to keep his mouth shut, or at least prevent the leaks from happening. So that's a smart move on his part. I am anxious to see what Lincoln Riley will do. Oklahoma ended up hiring Terry Venables, the DC from Clemson, where he used to work there. So, and then Miami also made a hire today with Mario Cristobal from Oregon.
Yep.
Manny Diaz was kind of kept in the dark until today, where he was officially announced that he was fired. And I know a lot of people were very, very much up in arms the way he got treated. And then it turned out that the money that Miami, which is, I think, is Miami a private university or is it public university?
It's private. Yeah.
Okay, so private. Okay, so they rely heavily on the donors and stuff like that when it comes to athletics and stuff. I read that their hospital health systems made so much money, and then I think it was about $400 million in profits or something like that they were able to cough up to get Cristobal, which I know a lot of people find it reprehensible that the money that they made, especially in this pandemic, were used to lure away a college football. College athlete, used for the athletics, and that Miami's still chasing their past glories now, and we'll see how this one turns out.
Yeah, and we can talk about the college football and the coaching carousel, and really to say that they get the coaches make more money than 10 times more money, probably even much more than that, than college professors and the presidents. And the board of regents, and the disparity it goes for that, and probably the priorities that are wrong. But of course, the universities will say, well, it adds prestige, it helps with our endowment, it helps with recruiting, not just sports, but also education as well, and bringing out more than that. And they said, well, if a Nobel Prize winner would make money, we would do that more and emphasize that more. But of course, college football is where it is, and it's king in athletics. I'm just interested, Stephen, about again, in speaking in regards to Brian Kelly, some of the hypocrisy that he has come about, and some of his statements that he has made. And then and here's a Boston guy who goes down to Baton Rouge in his first speech in front of the fans and faithful, and he goes, "My family." He goes, it's very funny. He just here it is actually.
Well, this is a great way to get started, and I haven't even won all my games yet. It's a great night to be a Tiger. I'm here with my family,
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, here's a guy from Boston who is never showed any traces of a Southern accent, and all of a sudden he's in Baton Rouge and has his all of a sudden he's all humble and apple pie and everything. So
Yeah.
it's
Slick
just,
guy, slick guy.
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of snake oil going in there. There's a lot of
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
lot of snake oil, especially along the college coaches, especially those who say one thing and then out of one side of their mouth, and then the another thing comes out from the other. It's just typical of this, and of course, it's the money that goes into college football that goes into ESPN is a big part of it. NBC, of course, giving a lot of money to Notre Dame to have their own contracts, and this goes back to 1991 when they first were able to get Notre Dame to sign a contract for originally 5 home games, and now I think it's about 6 or 7 home games that they show every year on their networks. And it's all about money, and of course, it's always has been about the money. And the college football coaches try to make it as much money as they can. And of course, you talk about Nick Saban. Here was another guy who said that he wasn't going to leave the Miami Dolphins. He was very happy being with the Miami Dolphins, and then laughed off the fact that he would never go back to college. And then Alabama came calling, and the next thing you know, he's on a plane leaving the Dolphins and going to the Alabama Crimson Tide. And of course, it's been there. He's been there ever since. But it's just funny just to see some of the statements. I know they can't. I know deep down inside they feel they don't want to anger the fan base, but it would be refreshing to me for one college coach say, "Yeah, I'm looking at the money. Yeah, I'm being recruited. Yeah, I know it could cost ourselves wins. I know that it may cost me some fan base, but yeah, I'm looking at the money. I'm looking to better myself. It would be refreshing. I know they're never going to say it, but I would love to see that.
No, and it's about, it's about recruiting as well. Brian Kelly obviously had his restrictions, with Notre Dame, and he's always going to face an uphill battle going up against the likes of Alabama, Clemson's. They were able to recruit. I'm sorry, the Clemson's and the Alabamas of the world. They can recruit 5-star, 4-star kids without any academic restrictions. And I think maybe Brian Kelly finally felt that this is his last shot at winning the title. So, if he had at least admitted that part, like I said, along with the money, nobody could blame him, right?
Mm-hmm. So let's bring in our first guest tonight. He's our first-time 3-time guest. He was on our very first show. I think he was on our second show, and I think might as well make him. Why don't we just make him a monthly guest? Why not? It's Mike Chen, who covers Notre Dame. When we last talked to Mike, we talked to him about who could ever succeed Brian Kelly, not knowing that he would be succeeding Brian Kelly the next month. Joining us now is Michael Chen, who covers the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for the USA Today Network. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, guys. Anytime.
Thank you so much. And I apologize. There was a bit of a miscommunication there, but
no worries.
Let's start with. Sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Brian Kelly heading off to LSU. We were talking about his legacy and how long he was going to stay there, and we didn't know that it was going to be weeks and just games, and mere weeks that he was going to be leaving for quote unquote greener pastures.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it was a shock to me as it was to many of us. When you looked at the writing on the walls, he still had another year. He just signed an extension there to stay in South Bend for an extra year. It seemed as if unfortunately they did not make the college football playoff. Outside looking in, still a New Year's Six bowl that they're going to. So obviously it's not exactly what Brian Kelly wanted, but you kind of thought that he had built something in South Bend that he could win with for a while, in my estimation. It's shocking because you look at how old he is. He's 60 years old. He signed a 10-year contract with LSU, and he's getting paid a ton of money. But aside from Nick Saban in the collegiate game right now, what coach is going to be that age and still performing at a high level. It's super demanding. Going out and recruiting. I mean, look, Urban Meyer said no. And Urban Meyer is a guy that you look at and say, all right, he's arguably, top 3 greatest college football coaches of all time. And he had the opportunity to take that Notre Dame job, because I think that, the athletic director Jack Swarbrick's not going to say that they reached out to him. I guarantee you they reached out to him. There must have been some sort of conversation, even if it was, are you interested? No, I don't want to go back to college game. Okay. But you still had to go and talk to him and figure out whether or not that he was interested. And he wasn't. And he's not even 60 yet. And so you look at that and you think, well, I don't know how long Brian Kelly is going to stay at Baton Rouge. I mean, I don't think that he runs out his contract there. I do think that he is successful. But remember, he's going up against SEC competition day in and day out. This is completely different. It's not a one-off here and there. We were playing, like last year, for instance, you played Clemson and that was the big game. I mean, in all honesty, the Irish really didn't play tough competition this year, aside from Cincinnati. And in that game, they obviously lost. It's to a college football playoff team, but they still lost. So I think when you look at big picture, I think that Brian Kelly kind of said, this is probably as good as I'm going to get it here at Notre Dame. But in all honesty, and I think Marcus Freeman, he is the perfect guy for the job. He is going to make that program be completely different, because when he came in just as the defensive coordinator, you saw an uptick in recruiting. You saw multiple student athletes go on social media and say, this is our next coach. This is who we want. And I think that says a whole hell of a lot about how the young men believe in Marcus Freeman and what he can do at Notre Dame. So I think it's a win-win for both parties, to be honest with you. I think Brian Kelly did everything he could in South Bend, and I think it's an opportunity for Marcus Freeman to have a long tenure there. I mean, he's 35 years old. He's got a lot of coaching in front of him. And, this is what you see now in the coaching profession. You see guys his age get an opportunity early, and he's going to have a lot of room to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people were praising his press conference today. Really, he knocked it out of the park for many people in the eyes of many people today. What stood out to you from your interaction with Marcus Freeman in the past, and what makes him such a qualified candidate, in your opinion?
Well, to be honest with you, I think a lot of it has to do with his age. I mean, he's 35 years old, like I just said. He's just a few years older than some of these guys. If he didn't have an injury, he probably would have played in the NFL for, 8 to 10 years. He was a very, very good linebacker coming out of Ohio State. And I think when you look at his coaching pedigree, he's a Midwest guy. He obviously, he was on Darrell Hazel's staff at Purdue. He coached at Ohio State under Luke Fickell as well. Went with Fickell to Cincinnati. Now, he had offers, again, last offseason, LSU wanted him. And he said no. He's a Midwest guy at heart. And I think that plays so big into what Notre Dame is looking for and what they wanted to achieve. And so, to me, I just think that there's so many great aspects of it. The recruiting, the age, the understanding of the environment, that closeness, his connections to Ohio. I mean, Ohio, in my estimation, for high school football, that's the best in the Midwest. That's the best above the Mason-Dixie line. And he's got inroads there. I mean, look at the recruiting class already. They've got Ohio guys. They missed out on a couple of top Ohio guys as well. But they're also getting, Brendan Vernon, who's a 5-star defensive end from Ohio. Those guys don't leave the state. They go to Ohio State. Right. And to see that happen, that tells me a whole hell of a lot about the recruiting prowess that Marcus Freeman has. And I think that's the one thing that you might be able to knock on that Brian Kelly tenure, is the fact that he probably didn't recruit as well as you could have at Notre Dame. but aside from that, winning, he won consistently and all that. But I just feel like, and I actually wrote about this exact scenario on Fighting Irish Wire right when they announced, well, obviously last week when all the rumors were happening. I said, look, I've seen this before. I went to school at Ohio State. I saw this. John Cooper was at the end of my, the end of his tenure at the beginning of my college years. And for all the good that he did for that program, he didn't win the big games. And then they brought in Jim Tressel, who had a different mindset, and he went out and won a national championship in his second year. I'm not saying that Freeman's going to win a national championship in his second year. I think it's going to be a couple of years, to be honest with you, especially with a new quarterback coming in next year. Although they've got Tyler Buckner there. He needs work. He's more of a runner than he is a passer. But I think that, when you look at the grand scheme of things, the similarities of what Ohio State went through with their transition from John Cooper to Jim Tressel and what Brian Kelly to Marcus Freeman, it's a mirror image in my eyes. And I could see Notre Dame becoming an absolute juggernaut in the next, starting in the next 2 or 3 years. It's 100% right in front of them.
Mm-hmm. In regards, going back to Kelly, do you think that his departure might have influenced some votes on the committee to not put them in the top 4?
I don't think so, to be honest with you. You kind of looked at the way everything was going to play out. I really didn't think that Alabama was going to lose to Georgia, which is exactly what happened. I think that when you look at it, if Notre Dame beat Cincinnati, I mean, that was the game, like we talked about earlier.
Right.
That was the biggest game on their schedule. And I think that them losing that game, that kind of ended their, college football playoff chances, if you may. And it's unfortunate because I think that at the end of the year, there weren't many teams in the country that were playing as good as Notre Dame. I mean, look at the stats. The defense came around and really started to play at a high level. And I just thought that, if you took that loss out and everything was equal, they're probably one of the top 4 teams in the country. But because they still had that loss, and that loss was to Cincinnati, who was still inside the top 4, it just wasn't going to happen. So I really don't think that him leaving really had much bearing on the committee. I think the committee looked at it as a whole. Even if there was a coaching change at other programs, I still think that all 4 programs that they selected would be in anyways, to be honest with you. So I really don't think that it would have bared much difference whether Kelly stayed or Kelly left.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much the committee got it right.
Yeah, I think so. I really do.
Mm-hmm. I will add that, Marcus Freeman, I think when he got drafted, he was with the Bears camp one time before I believe an enlarged heart was discovered.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to end his career there. So there's a bit of a history for us Bears fans there too. But let's talk about the state of Notre Dame. Obviously, every coaching staff stays, which I think speaks volume more about Freeman's character as much as it is about Brian Kelly's character. So Tommy Rees will remain as an OC, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And will Freeman call defense himself, or is there somebody who's going to do that for him?
My assumption is that he's going to hire somebody. I mean, as a head coach, it's a little bit more delegation. I think he's going to have his hands definitely more in the defense than he is in the offense. But I do think that he ultimately hires somebody, and it remains to be seen who he's going to select. I think that there's some pretty solid candidates out there. Off the top of my head, I couldn't name you any. But I don't see him, just saying I'm the defense coordinator / head coach. I think that's, especially for a first-time head coach, I think that that's way too much on his plate. I think that when you look at big picture, he's going to have to do some role delegating. And that's what a head coach does. I mean, he's the face of the program now. He can't say, all right, I'm going to do work on the defense and not touch the offense. He's got to be everywhere. He's got to have his hands on everything. So I think that ultimately he is going to hire somebody as a defensive coordinator. Who it's going to be, I don't know. I'm not quite sure yet, but I do think that he hires somebody, gets a little bit of that pressure off of him. And I definitely think that he's going to hire somebody that has ties to what he has done. There's a, I'm not sure if this is 100%, accurate or not, but I could definitely see him trying to poach Mike Tressel away from Cincinnati. They have a relationship. They have a coaching relationship. Tressel obviously replaced him there for Luke Fickell, and it would be a little jab to Luke Fickell as well to take another defensive coordinator away from him. But that's what happens in smaller programs. That's exactly what happens, and it's a stepping stone to a bigger program. And that's a name that I could definitely see ending up at Notre Dame. I mean, he's got the pedigree. He's a relative of Jim as well, and understands the Midwest. So I'm not saying that he's the guy, but a guy like.
And I think we lost Mike for a second there. Was Mike's audio? So I think we'll try and work on that. Hopefully we'll get Mike back. But in regards to Marcus Freeman, someone who is a younger coach, as Mike said, Mike writes for Fighting Irish Wire and also for the USA Today Network. And I think that having Marcus Freeman, who is a younger guy, as Mike mentioned, 35 years old, not too much older than some of the players, someone who can relate to the players. I think that Mike is going to be really a boon for him because he's so young and someone who has been with the players in that locker room and understands what they're going through.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm not sure if you guys got a chance to catch the video from Saturday when he officially announced to the team that he was the head coach. They all just swarmed him. I mean, they just flocked into him, and it was a sight to see. I mean, the video's like literally 30 seconds, and it's just like, wow, the players wanted him. And when, like I said earlier, when you went in social media and you saw players saying, "This is our next coach. This is who we want," I think that just tells you exactly the kind of guy he is. That's what they wanted. And Jack Swarbrick, in the press conference after Brian Kelly had left, said, it's not about the coach. The culture is not about the coach. The culture is about the student athletes. And he didn't necessarily say, yeah, there's the video right there. He didn't necessarily say that we're going to just, hire Freeman. But I think that he knew in the back of his mind that was his number one choice because the players have his back. And when a player has a coach's back and they want to play for that coach, I'm telling you, it's something different. It really is. And I'm sure a lot of people who've been involved in athletics and even lower level athletics, I mean, look at the reactions by these players. They are ecstatic. I mean, you don't see that. You really don't. And to have that connection with your players and have them backing you, that just means that they're going to fight just that much harder for you when you get in the field. So, it tells you a lot that, that's the reaction that the players had, because in all honesty, they're right. It's the Jimmies and the Joes. A lot of the times, X's and O's can win you games, but at the end of the day, it's about who has better players. It really is. And yeah, it plays a little bit more out in the NFL, because, it's any given Sunday out there. But, when you look at the collegiate game, I mean, there's a reason why Alabama is sitting at the top of the mountain year in and year out. They recruit the best across the board in the country. They have the best players. They really do. And when you have players who just want to play for you, it's something different, and it's definitely something that you love to see. And I think that's a big point that Brian Kelly, I wouldn't say necessarily didn't have, but finding his replacement in Freeman, I think that is it's exactly what Schwarbrick was looking for.
Right. Now, I will also add that since our show is about Asian Americans, I did not know this until today. Freeman's mother is a Korean American, and his father was in the military, serving in the military. From what I'm told, yes.
Yeah.
So for I think a lot of Asian Americans, I think Notre Dame just became a very a team to follow if they have no vested interest in college football up until now.
Hey, yeah, and go ahead and take a look at Tyler Buckner. He's half Asian as well. So there's
the
a lot
quarterback,
of
right? The quarterback.
yes,
right?
yeah. He should be the starter for next year as well. And so I mean, you look at this team and the way, I mean, there's mom right there. You look at it and you say, all right, this is a very diversified coaching staff. On top of that, a diversified group of players, and I think that speaks very highly of what the Notre Dame football team is and the way that they include everybody that is involved in it. So it's great to see the diversification there with the staff, and on top of it the players. And it's just something else that you don't normally see, and it's really nice to see what they're building in South Bend, because like I said, I really think that this could just the hire here could just make this sleeping giant. It really is. I mean, no championship since '88. It's been too long. One of the most prestigious universities in the country. On top of that, the history that they have with football, it's a sleeping giant. It really is. It's very similar to, in my estimation, it's very similar to what happened to Alabama in the '90s. I mean, they, the historical program was there. They just couldn't find the right coach. And I think that, for everything that Brian Kelly did, that was great. I think that he was just, the big games just really was, a bugaboo. And I mean, we'll see what happens with Freeman when those big games come. But, you're going to have to give him a little bit of leeway because he's a first-year head coach. He doesn't, Kelly, obviously coming from Cincinnati as well, he had that experience of being a head coach. So there's going to be some bumps in the road, of course. But at the end of the day, when we look back at this, I'm very confident that, Marcus Freeman's going to bring a championship to South Bend. I really am. I think that it's going to be, in a few years when, he really gets his hands on the whole roster. But I think very, very soon. I really do, because I think that there's a shift in power again. It's still Alabama and everybody else, but look at the other four teams in the College World Playoff. They're pretty much new teams. We really haven't seen those other teams in there. I mean, obviously Cincinnati, the first G5 school to make it.
Yep.
Georgia's been in there here and there, but
Sure.
it's not very consistent. The other big programs, the Oklahomas, they're going through a coaching change, obviously, with Lincoln Riley leaving. Ohio State had I wouldn't say a down year, but their two biggest games of this year they lost, and Clemson was kind of a mess this year. So the opportunity to sneak in and be one of those top four teams is right there, and I think that Notre Dame is one of those teams that can definitely step up and be one of those teams consistently for a long time.
How important, Mike, was for Notre Dame to get Marcus Freeman in, to shift that narrative, to make it from Brian Kelly left us, to get a young coach in here who can be the future on the face of this program for a very long time?
I think that that's exactly what they were looking for. Sorry, that's my dog shoes. Hey, come on.
No limit.
And I think that was one of the keys with the Freeman hire. I think that the age factor is just massively important. And when you look at it again, you look at it, a guy that could be around for 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, let's be real here. If he does everything right and he gets the program to where I believe that he can get the program to, they're going to continue to pay that man a lot of money, and he's going to make his home in South Bend, and he could go down as the greatest coach in Notre Dame history. I know that's putting a lot in his boat there, but I think that there's a lot of factors that are involved in it. I think he's taking over a program that doesn't need a lot of work.
Sure.
It's not a rebuild here. This is more of a retool, if anything. I mean, they're a top 6 team inside the college football playoff rankings. They made the college football playoff, 2 of the last 3 years prior to this one. So for pretty much 50% of the time of the last 4 years, this is not a rebuild.
Right.
And I think that's such a huge key. And as you guys mentioned before, being able to keep all of his assistants. I mean, everybody stayed. Like, everybody stayed. And you don't see that. You really don't. You don't see a coaching staff come in and retain everybody. Mm-hmm. And understandable, right? Freeman wasn't really a new guy. He's been working with those guys, for the last year or so. But for him to be able to just say, all right, I want you guys to stay, and for Jack Schwarber to make it happen as well, I think that says a lot. And I think that, ultimately, you're looking at a football team that's going to be really, really good for the foreseeable future in my eyes. I think that they're going to rival, the Ohio States and the Michigans, just like it was back in the 90s. I think that is, those 3 teams are going to become the powerhouse Midwest teams. I think, it's difficult for me to say this, but I think that Ohio State's grasp is on Midwest dominance is slipping a little bit. Yeah, especially on the defensive side. It wasn't just this year; it was last year as well. When you look at it, so I think that the preeminent power in the Midwest is still up there. I'm not as sold on Michigan. They might be a flash in the pan this year. Maybe everything worked well for them. But in all honesty, I think that the northern schools are going through a transition, and I think that, again, this is something that I could definitely see Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame taking full advantage of, and really kind of getting to that next level. Because watch, if their recruiting just takes this little tiny notch up, they're right there with the rest of the country. I mean, when you talk about the best teams up there. So if they can do it, and I think they can, you're going to see a college football team that's consistently in the conversation to win a national championship.
Awesome stuff. Mike Chen, writer for Fighting Irish Wire. We appreciate you coming on short notice with us. Also at PrepRedZone as well.com/Illinois. We will make sure we plug everything for you.
Hey, appreciate it, guys.
Wait. Since we're talking college football, let's end on this one. Mike, who's your pick for the title? National championship?
It's gonna be an SEC rematch. And this was like the conversation that a lot of us were having on Sunday was, how are they going to get ranked? I actually thought that they were going to put Michigan one. I really did.
I did too.
I thought that they were going to go. Excuse me. I thought they were going to go. I knew for a fact that they were not going to put Alabama to play Georgia again in the semifinal. There was no chance for that happening.
Right.
And I just didn't think that Alabama would make that jump from where they were, from 4 to 1. I didn't think that was going to happen. And their win was fairly convincing, though. So I can understand the rationale behind that. I think that it was always going to be Alabama playing Cincinnati, regardless of what that seed was, whether Alabama was the 2 and Cincinnati was the 3. I always thought that was going to be the case. It worked out that Alabama got the 1, Cincinnati got the 4. They got it right. The seeding was a little off, but I think that ultimately you're going to see a rematch of that SEC championship game.
And it will be Alabama winning again.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's so funny because I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch the Iron Bowl a couple weeks ago. I mean, Alabama. Auburn just gave them that game.
Right.
Their running back did go out of, he had the opportunity to stay in bounds, and he went out of bounds and saved him like 30 seconds. Sure. And that was that half minute. That was all that Alabama needed. And once they got into overtime, you knew Alabama was going to win that game.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was just like, I can't believe, I was watching this. I'm like, I cannot believe that Alabama was going to lose this game. and the window was open, and Alabama doesn't miss those windows.
Sure.
They don't.
No.
And I had conversations with plenty of people during that SEC championship game, leading up to the SEC championship game. They're like, "Who do you got? Georgia's going to win this." I'm like, "No. Nick Saban is literally the greatest X and O's college football head coach of all time. Do you not think he's going to out scheme Kirby Smart on the other side? Yeah, he damn sure is. And that's exactly what happened. They found their way. They did exactly what they needed to do, and they won the game. And they won it convincingly. And once again, Alabama is at the top of the mountain, and most likely we're going to see a Georgia Alabama rematch, and I see it going virtually the same way as it did in that SEC championship game, where Alabama wins by 2 to 3 touchdowns, and we continue to talk about how this Alabama dynasty is going to go down as one of the greatest in college football history.
Yeah. Right, and Bryce Young for the Heisman too, right?
Yeah.
I thought he clinched it when he beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, what he 400 yards and 6 touchdowns, I believe it was. 400 plus yards, something like that.
The SEC championship, yeah.
Right, yeah, against Georgia. I mean, you're doing that against the team that was pretty much wire to wire #1 in the country, and on top of that, they came in with one of the best defenses in the country as well. And for Bryce Young to go out and do that, and yeah, he was inconsistent for parts of the year, but ultimately brought them to the #1 seed in the college football playoff, an SEC championship. I can't see him not winning it. I really can't.
No, he sealed it for sure.
And I think so too. And there was watching the Michigan Ohio State game. And then on top of that, watching the Big Ten championship game against Iowa for Michigan. There's a lot of talk about a defensive player potentially winning the Heisman. That's just not how it works.
I know he's a finalist. Aiden Hutchinson. He had a
right.
Probably top 10 pick for sure. But yeah, maybe this is not the year for it.
No, this is not. You have to do maybe if he caught a touchdown or something here and there. It's just not enough. He's a great player, and to be honest with you, he might even go even higher than top 10. There's chatter that he could go 1 or 2 in the draft, and so I get it.
I understand. A local kid for sure, absolutely.
Right, and I get it. I understand it, but look, a defensive guy, unless and it's ironic that the last defensive player, Charles Woodson, went to Michigan and won the Heisman, but it's an offensive award, and I think the consensus is that Bryce Young's going to be holding up that bronze statue. I believe it's this Thursday. And it's weird. Alabama guys, when they go to New York, it doesn't phase them.
They always win.
Not one bit. They win, and they go out and they perform. There's no Heisman hangover for those guys. There just isn't.
No, and they're mentally tough, and Nick Saban has shown that year and year again. And kind of like what Bill Belichick did with his Patriots, they're mentally tough, and he puts them through all types of scenarios, and that's why they win.
Yeah, it's 100%. I think a lot of it has to do with the way Nick Saban does things, and it's rough watching it because they're like the New York Yankees back in the day, where you want to see them lose, but they just don't. But you have to respect the fact that he's built that program into an absolute juggernaut, and year in and year out, they are one of the best teams in the country, regardless of who's at what position. And it's just absolutely amazing what Nick Saban has done. And it looks like if we're going to judge it, then they're probably going to be holding up that crystal ball. So it's unfortunate, but that is what it is.
Well, Mike Chen of the Fighting Irish Wire and we the USA Today Network, we really appreciate you coming on talking college football and Notre Dame. And you know what? We may have you come on again next month for just talk about the college football playoff national championship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I'm more than willing to. So just let me know, guys.
Absolutely. Mike Chen, thank you very much. And
thank you, Michael.
Our next guest coming up soon in the next break will be Ben Koo, and that'll be coming up after this message on the Double A Team.
Really understanding the difference between empowerment and agency versus objectification. And the difference is always who has the power. If I choose that I feel my best and I look my best and I'm the most confident in a certain outfit, then I am empowering myself to make that choice and to tell you that I'll show you who I am and let you know who I am. You can't make those decisions based off what I'm wearing. But if it's objectification because the producers or directors or whoever runs a show is saying you have to wear a dress every show and high heels have to be this high, you have to dye your hair blonde, it's a very different thing, right? So I do think we have to remember that, because a lot of people will look at women who are stepping into their own sexuality and accuse them of not being also allowed to talk about harassment and other things. They're very different things. It's about choice and power.
The coaching, I both coached Griffin and Dylan in youth football, but that had just ended. It was Dylan's season had just ended, and when Griffin passed away, and so then, as I said, my mom, she had prior to Griffin passing away, though, it was a Mother's Day, actually the day after Mother's Day that very year, she found out she had stage 4 uterine cancer. And so she survived just a lethal surgery where they removed a lot. And so she somehow survived that, only to 8 months later pass away. And so there was kind of a rough time there where, for me, it felt like everybody was going, nobody was coming.
Yeah.
And so, I that led me to a serious bout of depression, to the point where in August of 2015, I actually shot myself and in the head, underneath the chin, and with the intention of not being here. And so as I look back now, everything I didn't have to live for, I now have to live for. And so it was just a period of time where life was tough. And it was, once you get down, what my experience is, once I got down that low, it didn't feel like it was ever going to end. And unless I ended it.
The past year has seen a 1,900% rise in anti-Asian hate crime in New York City alone, with 2,800 incidents reported across 47 states and Washington, D.C. This is a national crisis, and we need your help to call it out. Call it a crime. Call it what it is: racism. Let's stand up together against hate. Learn more at stopaapihate.org.
We're back on the Double A team, Ken Fang, along with Stephen Negishi, and we like to bring in our next guest. He is a person who brought me into awful announcing, I think almost 10 years ago, maybe more than 10 years ago.
Oh, God. I think you're right. And it's crazy. The world was much different back then.
It was. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ben Ku, the Chinese Jew. And I say that, and I don't worry about me saying that, because he put that in his Twitter introduction, and so yes. I often call him that. And he is the owner and CEO of Comeback Media, which encompasses not only just the comeback.com, but awful announcing. And for disclosure purposes, I am a contributor to both and a writer for awful announcing, and that's where you get your daily viewing picks. That's where I send them all the time. Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for having me, Ken and Stephen. Was listening earlier. I've checked out a few episodes. You guys have really found a groove, and I think you guys are off to big things, I hope.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ben. And we'll talk a little bit about our first interview, which was with Mike Chen. He was talking a little bit about how Ohio State was slipping. Seems to be. Did you see that face? Ben is a Ohio State alumnus and lives in Columbus, so I figured I'd throw that shot in. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Ben, let's talk a little bit first about how you got to become the owner of the comeback and awful announcing. At one time, awful announcing was dead. It was a rival site of mine that I used to write at Fang's Bites, which is also dormant now. But awful announcing was a part was being run, and it just was dormant for a while. Then you came along and brought it back.
Yeah, I was working in the sports blog space in 2008 and 9, and I loved awful announcing. I loved how you could watch a game, and this was in Twitter's infancy, and people would go, I don't like this guy, or they screwed that up, or I think they need to do this better. You know, it could be the NCAA selection show where they waited 45 minutes before revealing the bracket, and we'd all be like bemoaning, something. And awful announcing would always kind of take everyone's kind of thoughts and, put it into, really good articles. And, the site would break some stories if people were getting hired at networks, or if sports rights were moving from one network to another network. And I thought it was really interesting. And I thought this space deserves a site, and one written for fans, not for like the business people. And so when the site just stopped publishing, I thought that was a shame. And I said, I think this is interesting. I think enough people do. And I talked with the owner, and he saw that I had good intentions and I was passionate, and I wanted to run the site myself and be very involved. And so we acquired that site over 10 years ago. You're right, Ken. It's been 10 years ago. And things have gone well. There's been many adventures and stories and changes, but I think the fact that the site's still around, and a lot of sites have changed ownership or gone away, I think it speaks a lot that people really like sports media and discussing how they consume sports media.
It seemed to be that our competition used to be the Big Lead and Deadspin, and we don't see much of them anymore, but now we have other sites. But awful announcing keeps going, and you also brought in the comeback. What made you think? What made you decide to bring in the comeback and also combine it with awful announcing?
Well, we had a lot of people writing about sports media, and we were making that some people's full-time jobs. But the space is very limited. So if there's a slow day, and I'm employing you full-time to kind of cover news, and there's just a slow news day in sports media, not much has happened, we thought it would make sense to have a site where we could write additional content about sports and pop culture. That site has grown, and especially the last few months has grown a lot. And it's also just like getting more scale, having two sites to monetize, having a larger audience. I'm going to have to check out the full interview with Mike, because maybe I'll have a retort to Ohio State slipping. And then I'll go on the comeback.com and I'll write my retort.
Well, I initially approached Ben beginning about this idea for the show. And Ben was actually kind enough to introduce Ken as our co-host, and as everybody else say, the rest has been history. And Ben has been kind enough to give us props for our work together. We've only been show number 5 right now, but with the help of Aldo Gandia, who's also, like you, the owner and editor-in-chief of the Barroom Network in Chicago, has been very, very supportive and from this venture from the very, very beginning. So we want to thank both of you gentlemen for bringing us together. I want to talk to you about the current state of sports media. What kind of trends are you seeing right now that's been encouraging, or what are some of the things that we should be focusing on going forward that you might say, boy, this is not going in the right direction of sorts?
Well, I think there's more bad than good. I think Ken might agree. Mm-hmm. Something that I've been tweeting about a lot lately is we're seeing poor picture quality as ESPN is under some mandate from Disney to cut production costs. So you're seeing a lot of camera views. You're seeing events being broadcasted with less cameras. So if there's a replay you need to see a definitive angle on, you're less likely to get it. And some of the actual picture quality you're beginning to see suffer in events like college football, college basketball, soccer was this last weekend.
Yeah,
MLS, yes.
they look like they're being shot from a high-rise building several blocks away.
Yeah.
That's how bad they are. We used to complain that's how it was with CONCACAF soccer, with the CONCACAF qualifiers, but now they're being brought into Disney. So maybe those same producers that do the CONCACAF soccer World Cup qualifiers, Ben, are being brought to do the college football for especially Pac-12 football, which really is being suffering the most on the production quality from ESPN.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to highlight. And I've been really feisty on Twitter about it and vocal because, you know, we can debate if Sports Center's gotten better or worse, or the studio shows or the writing or whatever. But like most of the time, the audience comes to ESPN, we're watching the game, you know, and for a step back like this, it's discouraging because you notice it. You spend a lot of money on a good TV. Maybe you're watching another game on another channel, or maybe you're like me, you have two TVs next to each other, and one looks like totally fine what you're used to, and you look at the other one and you're like, is it my TV? Is it my cable company? And it's ESPN trying to save money, and everyone notices, or you know, a lot of people notice, and you know, there are people in sports media, and there's personalities that maybe I don't like, but I know a lot of people like them. So I would say, oh, this has gone to hell. But that's just a personal opinion. There's nobody out there who is like, I like it when the picture's bad, you know? So, you know, regardless of my opinions or our site's opinions or what's popular on Twitter, what I'm going to fight for is just, you know, you hate to see something like that coming up with a lot of regularity. So, sure. I would say that's a trend that I'm really concerned with right now. You're seeing more remote production. You know, you're seeing less politics being purposely.
Oh. And I think we lost Ben for a second. We'll vamp for a little bit there, but I know where Ben was talking about because I know a lot. I'm privy to a lot of those conversations that we have about ESPN. And one of the things I'm going to ask Ben when we get him back is the public relations departments for the various networks which have contacted us over the years in regards to some of the things we've written. And of course, one of the funnier things is that, of course, when people don't like what we've written, they'll come and complain and they'll say, look, and we expect that. But there's one particular public relations department that is head and shoulders above the rest as far as complaining in regards to stuff we write. And I'll ask Ben about that. I know what the answer is, but Ben will answer that. I think he knows what I'm talking about. But Stephen, some of the things that have you seen stuff like that? And as far as poor quality, as far as when you watch your games, is that something you've noticed?
You know, I'm not fully engaged as you guys are, but you know, I've seen some of the things that was being written on awful announcing. Obviously, the MLS Eastern Conference game last Sunday, yesterday, obviously was brought up, and then I know Pac-12 game, I believe Stanford and Oregon, that was a pretty bad
it was really
quality game. I do remember that one as well.
Yeah, and one thing I joke about is that whenever I watch CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers, they seem to be shot from high-rise buildings across the street. We have Ben back now, and nice to have you back. One thing that I was talking to Stephen about, that one thing that we've noticed about it, awful announcing, is that, of course, public relations departments will complain when we write something negative. But and I know the answer to this, and I know that you're probably going to give me the answer. Is there one particular network that we have seen that has come out and just completely come over and complained about stuff that we've written?
I mean, I think networks have generally been fair with us. I think we have a pretty non-warm relationship with Fox Sports. You know, we've been critical of a few things, and I think. You know, the interesting thing is Colin Cowherd went on a podcast recently and basically said, "What's the point of PR? No one's going to listen. You shouldn't. Don't deal with this. Whatever the bad stuff people are saying about Fox or ESPN, it's going to go away, and it doesn't matter. Just don't whatever." And I think that's part of Fox's kind of philosophy. And, I think there's some merit to that. So there's some times where we're trying to get some kind of information about something positive, like when is this show airing, or something like that. And sometimes it's a little odd to not get a response in like 2 or 3 days.
Yes, right.
But I think, generally, 9 times out of 10, we're getting at least a fair shake. I think we have some times where we're not in agreement about something. But I think the incidents where I'm really like someone at the site, maybe it's you, maybe it's me, are really kind of like these people are bonkers or they're being rude. It's not that frequent. I think people generally have thick skin, and maybe there's like an incident a month where you're like, that guy was being an asshole or that woman was really kind of being a little bit ridiculous. But we're doing like 10 stories a day, so that's like 300 stories. So if you have one incident a month where you're really butting heads with someone, that's 1 out of 300. So I'll generally say that the PR folks, they pick and choose their battles, and I think some of that's because we push back on them when we don't think they're right. Sometimes we're not going to see it eye to eye, so why just kind of have it out,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Ken, what's your take on this?
Well, I think because I tweet more, I think ESPN came down on me quite a bit, especially during the early Monday Night Football days when I would pick on John Gruden for saying this guy a lot.
Yeah,
they would get on my case. There's certain PR guys. I'm not going to mention them because they're not worth mentioning, but I will say that sometimes I got called out for something I didn't write. A network called me up while I was driving and yelled at me, and I go, well, that's very nice, but I didn't write that article. I just want to let you know that Matt Yoder wrote that. And she said, well, what is Matt Yoder's number? I said, I'm not going to give you that number. You must have it somewhere. But if you want to talk to Matt, I'll certainly pass the message along. But she said, are you sure you didn't write that? And I said, yes, I'm very sure I didn't write that because I know I didn't write that because Matt Yoder wrote it. So it was very funny. But for the most all intents and purposes now, they're mellowed quite a bit. But I think in the early days of Twitter, I would constantly get stuff from flack from ESPN, especially because I think they treat I think because first of all they're in Bristol, not in one of the major metropolitan centers, and also they're just treat they kind of treat the place like the Kremlin, so it's very secretive and very they just protect it with at all costs.
Yeah, I mean, I generally think there's like standards in terms of the way, they should treat us and we should treat them. And sometimes we get into a little bit of gray area and we'll duke it out. The one, I mean, I'll give you a good one, which just didn't sit well with me. And I think you might know who this person is. Someone made fun of Urban Meyer on, and this is, I didn't even like Urban Meyer at this point. He had left Ohio State and gotten in some trouble. But I think it was John Anderson said, there's Urban Meyer watching the game. He's had a miraculous recovery from his health issues. But, Urban Meyer did have some documented health issues, so I thought it was like a cheap shot. Mm-hmm. And I said I'm curious if ESPN is going to comment on it because I heard Urban Meyer was furious. And a bunch of Michigan fans really piled on me. I think I got like 300 replies, like – whatever, and someone called me like a cuck swear word.
Yikes.
And an ESPN PR guy liked the tweet,
Oh my goodness.
So like this guy's like, you're a cuck, BI, that word, and I'm like, whoa. And then I didn't really care. I was taking it from all angles. I got thick skin. I'm like, it's odd that an ESPN PR guy who I emailed about this and said, "Is ESPN going to do anything?" He liked the tweet, and then I confronted him. I said, "It seems a little like a low blow."
Yeah.
And he apologized, and then he was like, "Yes, there was an apology. It was private." I think he didn't think I was going to say anything about it, but I said that seems real lame, like, and that's one time. But we've been doing this 10 years, and I've only had a couple heated conversations with anyone at PR across all the networks, and they've sent you some nice things when you've had some things going on in your life. I talk to these people. I know how their families are doing and so on. So I think generally we do okay.
Yeah, exactly. Now I know that you're a big Ohio State guy, and Mike Chen, who was on with us earlier, was talking about how the hiring of Marcus Freeman was good for Notre Dame, and I think it probably is very good for Notre Dame. And he felt that Notre Dame is probably on the precipice of taking over the Midwest football over from Ohio State and Michigan. You being very biased in regards to this, and you're being an Ohio State guy, how do you feel about that statement?
Oh, Mike Chen, what? That's what he said?
Yeah.
Oh, well, here's the thing. We'll find out. We play Notre Dame next year. We play them the next year. And I don't think you can just make assumptions like that.
He said eventually. He didn't say right away, but he did say
within 2-3 years. That's what he says.
Regimes are not toppled so easily. Like Jim Tressel came here in 2001, and this team's been like in the top 5 probably like 3 years out of 4. They finished in the top 5, and they might do it this year. They win their bowl game, they're going to finish in the top 5. So Notre Dame has done well under Brian Kelly.
Sure.
Whenever there's a coaching thing, you never know how it goes. Look at any coaching big at Florida State, Miami, with Manny. Look at the hires from like 3-4 years ago. People like 2 years ago, Ed Orgeron won SEC Coach of the Year. So I am very skeptical of any hire coming in, and then people going, it's fixed and we're now the best.
Yeah.
Because Nebraska would be back, Miami would be back, Michigan wouldn't have gone through the Brady Hoke and Rich Rod years. So Marcus Freeman seems like a good hire, but everyone kind of seems like a good hire at the time. So I'm glad Mike's feeling good, and that could happen.
That's why they play the game.
It could happen. It could happen. I'm not saying Notre Dame can't be better than Ohio State and Michigan. But, I don't think you just go from the bronze to the gold with a hire. I think you can never make assumptions of like a program making an elevation, but it's very plausible. But I gotta rewatch this and talk with Mike at some point.
We'll definitely have you guys together, and then we could probably do like a round table, where we do freestyle.
Hey, they're coming to Columbus next year. Tell Mike to come down. I'll put in a word with the people, and we'll bet dinner.
Yeah.
I knew this would get you off. I knew would be able to set you off. So you being a very, very big Ohio State guy, and notice how I've never really said anything about Ohio State in the time that I've worked with awful announcing. So I've basically
you're free to. If you look at the history of awful announcing and the comeback, we have plenty of negative. I do negative coverage of Ohio State. So.
Yeah,
I don't take it too. My tweets are generally kind of making fun of the fan base. We have a lunatic fan base that does not speak well to for the state. And
they drove Kirk Herbstreit away from Columbus. I mean, that's So now he's living in Nashville. But here's a guy who is an Ohio State alumnus.
He's back.
Oh, he's back. Okay.
In Cincinnati now, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But they basically drove him out of Columbus, and he had to move away. So
right.
There's a significant overlap of Ohio State super fans and QAnon is what I would say. Okay?
Oh wow! Well, sometimes, yeah, the fanatics can go in towards that direction for sure.
Yeah, it's not even like a joke. Like there's
Yeah.
significant overlap. So
Yeah. That's true. What do you think of the Amazon's role in getting sports broadcasting? The Thursday Night Football, obviously this month is being broadcasted on the NFL Network and on Amazon. Do you think Amazon is going to really disrupt the sports broadcasting scene? And if so, what kind of impact do you think it will have?
yeah, I think they're strongly considering it. They have Thursday Night Football starting next year. They might end up with Sunday Ticket. They might buy equity in NFL Network, which makes total sense because, like, if all these new people are going to start watching Thursday Night Football on Amazon and people are signing up, they're going to want those people to watch other things on Amazon. So they need more football content. I was talking to Steven about how I'm working on this, Bishop Sycamore documentary, and one of the people we talked to was Amazon, and I said to them, Fox is pimping the Madden thing like crazy, the John Madden documentary.
Right.
And then like a couple weeks ago, Al Michaels was promoting like a Paris Hilton show on Peacock, so Amazon's gonna have Thursday Night Football, and they don't have like TV shows to be like, check out Young Sheldon or check out, it's going to be like buy sweatshirts. They're going to need like football content so people stay within the Amazon video experience. So I think, step one, Thursday Night Football. Step two, maybe Sunday Night Football on the NFL Network. And I think step three down the line is going to be like, can we play a role at local with the RSNs? Because that thing is like cratering, and someone's going to have to come in and figure out a new way to do it. And they already, I think Chen knows they're invested in the Yes Network, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think they are going to be involved because if they're not like other tech companies who have been taking little like bites. They ordered a steak. They have Thursday Night Football. And so the numbers would have to be terrible for them to just like move away from this process. They are. This is going to snowball. These things usually snowball unless there's some type of regime change at Amazon, which is going to be more transformative than Marcus Freeman taking Notre Dame.
That's shot.
Another shot there.
One thing we've seen, I think, over the last 10 years. Ben, in our coverage of the sports media, is that when we began, ESPN was the big elephant in the room. Cable was about 100 million, almost on a level viewing plane with broadcast television. Since that time, we've seen them fall off, and now streaming is the big thing. Do we think that, you talked a little bit about Amazon, but do we think streaming is going to be playing a big part in sports rights over the next 10 to 15 years?
I think it's going to be the status quo for 5 to 10, where sports rights are going to be acquired and they're going to say, well, it's going to air on CBS, but we can also stream it on Paramount Plus or maybe some of these lesser games. I think if you look at the conference deals ESPN's doing, it's like, hey, some of your games are going to be on ABC, broadcast television. Some of them are going to be on ESPN. Some of them are going to be an SEC network, which is like, this other cable thing we have. And then we're gonna put some on ESPN Plus behind a paywall. So I think if you think of it at those like 3 or 4 levels, whether you consider SEC network kind of different than ESPN, I think you're just going to continue to have deals done where little chunks, the leftovers, are going to be put onto streaming for some lesser things, and that slice of the media rights pie is going to get bigger. But I think your traditional top half of games and stuff, like I haven't had to watch an Ohio State basketball game or football game yet on streaming. Is that going to be the case in 4 or 5 years? If the NFL has taken the plunge of like streaming only, that's the green light for everyone else to say we can put our shit on streaming. So if someone's going to write a check to put it on streaming, it's going to happen, and you're seeing that with a lot of stuff. And it's somewhat annoying, but as long as it's the production quality is okay, and you're able to kind of sort it out. I'm more worried about like some of our parents. Like, hey, mom, my mom went to Michigan, so that's odd. Mom, you gotta open up the Zone to watch the Michigan basketball game. That's not going to go well.
Right.
I was there 2 weeks ago, and it was a disaster trying to set up different electronics for them. So, yeah, things are gonna things are gonna continue to move to streaming. I was trying to watch a wrestling match, not like WWE wrestling, but like college wrestling. And
I remember you tweeting about that because you had to pay without a trial subscription or something like that.
Well, not even just the trial. I was like, it was basically the number 1 versus number 2 in a weight class was going to happen, which rarely happens early on in the season. So I'm like, I'll check that out. And before I've done this with different services, and it's like $9.99 for the month. And I go, and it was like, it's $150 for the year. And I'm like, yeah, but what's the month? And I look more, and it's just 1 year. There's no, when you go to sign up for a site, there's like 1 month offer, the 1 year, the 2 year, and you pick. This was give us $150, and I said, I'm not giving you $150. So I think they need to keep things accessible.
Right. The cost is always going to be the key in these subscriptions.
Yeah.
One thing Ben has been doing, and his reporting was fantastic, was the Bishop Sycamore high school controversy. This team, which had been not only playing just high school football, but be playing multiple games a week with these players. It's something that we're seeing with a lot of this really took off. It not only become a viral sensation, but multiple outlets reported on it. Let's we'll talk a little bit about this as much as we can, Ben. So what can you tell us in regards to this and about a documentary that we're trying to do?
Yeah, so it was the end of August, and Bishop Sycamore is playing basically the number 1 or 2 team in the country on ESPN. And, I'm sitting on my couch, and I'm seeing some tweets, and basically the announcer says something like, we'd like to tell you more about Bishop Sycamore, but they're really a mystery. We don't know anything about them. We're worried about their safety because this game is totally unfair and is out of hand. And ESPN's based, they were so angry. The announcers were legitimately pretty angry about the game, and they kept saying like number 12 makes the tackle for Bishop Sycamore. We don't know who that is because we weren't provided rosters. And so, I'm on this kind of early, trying to figure out how did this team get there? Who are they? They're allegedly from Columbus, and people I know on Twitter are saying, I've coached here 20 years. I don't know who these guys are. Other people are, saying things. So I look into it. They don't have a school building. The players are not high school age. They had played under another name and got busted for not being a high school. There's just they owe a lot of people money. The head coach had a warrant out for his arrest. And it's one of those things is where everyone just wants more answers. You give them one more answer, you give a few answers, and it still doesn't make sense. And then they have 10 more questions, why would you send your kid to play there? Where did the kids sleep? Did the kids, the kids weren't eating enough. We had someone we taped for the documentary say they came in at 205 and they left after 3 months at 180 because they were stealing food to eat. So, and the other thing was the thing that kind of got me rolling on this was I reported. I was the first one to report on a few things, but I think as early as a few hours after the game ended, I had figured out that they were playing 2 games in one weekend. Because they were getting money to play other schools, which is essentially a big part of this is that really good schools can't find anyone to play. No one wants to go and get their butt kicked against a really good school. But the other school wants to play because they can fill up their 10,000 seat stadium, $10 a ticket, 10,000 seats, that's $100,000. People buy a hot dog, they pay for parking. That could be $200,000. It's a huge amount of money for a high school that pays for all the other sports and so on. So there's this business model where you can kind of invent a fake school, and they go, well, we don't really have money. You need a game. Pay us $25,000 to come up there, so for hotel and busing,
Sure.
and we'll play. And there's streaming money as well and so on. So that's the motivation of Bishop Sycamore, and there's a lot of victims in this situation. And there's a lot of people trying to tell the full story. HBO is moving forward, although everyone's so interested in this story, and everyone in Hollywood wants to tell this story. And a lot of the people at the networks are concerned because they don't want to do the second or third best Bishop Sycamore documentary. There's some need for some of the projects to consolidate. And if there's 15 people who have great information on this story, and I think I'm one of them, but they're divided up into 4 different projects, sure. it becomes this kind of like quagmire that I'm trying to navigate through. And I've been here with 2 different groups of people doing some filming. So I'm interested to see what shakes out. I was speaking with the person, my agent, who's kind of helping me, and he said this has become almost as interesting in terms of who's going to make the documentary on what channel than the actual controversy itself. So, yeah,
I hope they get a proper credit, though.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it, and we're still kind of working on it, but yeah, it's definitely like a messy thing. I've learned a lot. I've learned a ton, and I know a lot more about the story that I want to get out there, and I hope things kind of sort itself out pretty quickly.
Well, Ben Koo, the Chinese Jew, the owner and CEO of Comeback Media, the head of the Comeback and Awful Announcing, the guy who hired me almost over 10 years ago to come to Awful Announcing, a guy who's been my friend for this all this time, and Ben and also managed to get me and connected with Steven and Aldo for this show. So you're a deal maker, and you're definitely not a deal breaker. So, and we appreciate you coming on, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. You said it's been 10 years. I think 8 years ago I met you in person.
Yes, you did.
You told me how old you were. I didn't believe it because I thought you looked way younger. Can you continue even 8 years past when we met? You continue to age wonderfully, and I hope I share.
Ben, thank you so much on short notice tonight. I know you have to go pick up your wife at the airport. I'm in Columbus now, so I will see you hopefully very, very soon before the end of the year for a coffee or a meal or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I said I'd take you up on that, so glad you're here. Thank you for having me on. I would like the address of Mike Chen and his phone number, and we'll go from there.
I'm sure Steven can provide that to you.
Yeah,
so.
well, I'll provide him.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
All right.
Ben, thank you very much. And the AA team will continue right after this.
All right.
And gentlemen, this is what's going to happen. It happens every freaking year. We'll probably win some games at the end of the road. But honestly, I'm thinking longevity for our team. I'm not wishing for us to lose. But if we win these games, Matt Nagy's going to freaking stay. And I respectfully don't want that, because I just feel like, Matt Nagy, bro, you're awesome, bro. You're a good man. I would love to shake your hand one day, take a picture with you. But in terms of leading this team of men, leading this team to a championship team, he's not saying I want to win Super Bowl Chicago. He's not saying that. He's not saying I want to win a division. He's not saying that. He's not saying we have the best defense in the country. No, he's complimenting everybody else. He's not saying we're going to have the best quarterback ever. Justin Fields, he's not saying that. He's not proclaiming his team. And I respectfully want a coach who's going to cast a vision that we're going to go forward. He's been talking about the why for so many years, but the why is the damn Super Bowl, and that's not being talked about, and that's not being talked about enough. So therefore, why win these games, Aldo? Because it's like no, we need to rip the Band-Aid up. We have to go to bat. We have to be able to accept what's about to happen. If we lose the next 7 games, I won't be upset. I'm like, it's like, all right, this is what we expect because it's a false positive if we do win the next 7 games. I'm like, I don't believe you, bro. I don't believe you. You're only doing it because you're going fired. But you should have thought about that week 1. Why is your team not prepared for Sunday? Why is your team not prepared for Sunday at this stage in the game?
And we're back on the AA team. Ken Fang along with Stephen Negishi. Thanks to our guests, Mike Chen of Fighting Irish Wire and Ben Koo, owner and CEO of Comeback Media, and the fearless leader of the Comeback and Awful Announcing, and my boss. So we thank them very much. Thank them both for coming on. Stephen, let's talk briefly here. This is a Bears-centric network. The Barroom Network is. So let's talk a little bit about the Bears yesterday. The Arizona Cardinals coming in, a West Coast team playing mostly in a dome, coming in and then pretty much wiping the Bears out yesterday. Really, we wondered if Kyler Murray was going to be have any rust after 3 weeks off, and he didn't have any rust after 3
Not
weeks
at all.
off.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you play the Bears, you will look good, no question. I mean, listen, the game itself was ugly as the weather itself. There's no question about that. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's just basically you're furthering delaying the inevitable that Matt Nagy is going to get fired. Now, obviously, his son getting harassed, Thanksgiving game was unacceptable. And look, he's a fine guy. Obviously, none of us have never met, but I'm just going to based on what I've heard and what I've seen of him. I'm sure he's a decent guy, and I think we can agree on that. But as a head coach, I think he just basically he's just basically overmatched, and just really got nothing left to prove at this point. 4-8, you're basically done with the playoffs. I don't think there isn't anybody in the world out there who's a Bears fan that this time there will be no miracles. Obviously, I've seen enough of him. Andy Dalton playing yesterday. To think that he was actually QB1 before Justin Fields got drafted. Obviously, Nagy wanted this guy to, help win ball games, but his arms just isn't strong enough anymore. He threw 4 picks. Obviously, not all of them were his fault, but the fact of the matter is he threw 4 picks, and that's undeniable. The talent level is very, very bad right now. The depth is completely gone with so many injuries. And I think you can now make a strong case that maybe both Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy both needs to be wiped off, and then start with a clean slate. Next week, if the Packers completely destroy the Bears, and if Andy Dalton is still playing rather than Justin Fields, who's nursing a broken rib, it will probably going to get ugly. And I'm very surprised that the NFL did not flex this game to avoid any embarrassment for us Bears fans.
Yeah, and I gotta say that in some of the inserts I saw in NFL Red Zone yesterday, it just wasn't a very well played game for the Bears, and it's just one of those situations where Arizona was just running roughshod all over Chicago. And you're right, the NFL had a perfect opportunity to flex out Green Bay and Chicago in next week for the prime time, but they're going to keep that game there. I know why they're keeping it there, because Aaron Rodgers and Chicago is a big market, and they'll get 20 million viewers despite the fact that at least it may be a blowout. But I think the NFL wants to have an NFL Central game, or NFL North game, as we call it now. They want an NFL division, and they want that glorified rivalry that between the Bears and the Packers in prime time. But based on what we saw on Sunday, this may be quite ugly next Sunday.
Yeah, I think all of us Bears fans are pretty much accepted the inevitable that, there's no point in delaying this. Matt Nagy's a goner. I think we can all agree on that. There's so many things that bothers me about Matt Nagy as a head coach, but he showed up today in his own press conference, I think more than half an hour later, and I think the people that I follow were ripping him on that one. That's some sort of a leadership he has. And then he mentioned Tevin Jenkins, who's been on the IR pretty much the entire season, as a depth piece. I know Jason Leisure of the Sun-Times, who's been very, very critical of the Bears and Nagy from day one, ripped him. Calling him a depth piece is somewhat of, I think, unnecessary. We all want to see him. And I know Ryan Pace, the GM, who moved up to get him, obviously is probably forcing, Nagy and his coaching staff to, force him to get some meaningful playing time, going forward. But Nagy, ever the guy who's trying to find out the whys and all that nonsense, just won't able to pull the plug on Jason Peters, the veteran and a future Hall of Fame, who's actually done a very good job, for a guy who was fishing when he got the call just right before week one. Has played very, very decently, but at some point, if Matt Nagy is not going to do the job or what is expected of him, just pull the plug. Don't let, the next 5 weeks play out as it is. You're just basically proving that you're so out of depth and out of reality, which is nothing unusual for us Bears fans who had to put up with the ownership who hasn't nothing has gotten right under their leadership. So, the next 5 weeks are going to be very, very rough if Justin Fields isn't available. So
yeah, well, it's going to be a rough week in Chicago leading up to the Packers game, and it's going to be a rough week probably after that. So, but at least the one good thing is that we will be back next week. We are coming back next week instead of in 2 weeks. We will be coming back next week and with a whole new show. So, Stephen, we look forward to that.
Thank you as always, Ken. And we're going to line up, hopefully another great, strong guests for our show on the 13th of December. And
we'd like to thank Mike Chen of the Fighting Irish Wire and the USA Today Network talking to us about college football, and Brian Kelly and Notre Dame football. And we appreciated the retort and the response from Ben Koo, Ohio State alumnus, and the owner of and CEO of the Comeback Media, the comeback.com, and also awfulannouncing.com. We appreciate their appearances on the show. This has been the Double A Team. I'm Ken Fang for Stephen Negishi. We wish you a very good night and a very good week, and we'll be back again next week.
Thank you.